The front pages of leading global outlets are increasingly filled with headlines that until recently seemed unthinkable. Financial Times, Der Spiegel, Le Monde, and even the Wall Street Journal are publishing stories about how many US allies are beginning to reconsider their relationship with Washington. The key reason is Donald Trump's policies, which are increasingly seen not as an attempt to defend American interests, but as a deliberate dismantling of the global order, where the US once acted as the guarantor of stability. Now, America itself is becoming a threat. Major analytical reports describe this shift as a domino effect. One country after another is distancing itself from the US, exploring new alliances and trade routes that just yesterday would have been dismissed as fantasy. The first alarm came from Europe. According to Politico, several senior officials in Brussels admitted that within the EU there is a growing recognition that dependence on the American market and the dollar is becoming a liability. The trigger was Trump's decision to impose tariffs on key European exports, from wine and cheese to agricultural machinery. Washington no longer listens to anyone. It dictates, a source in the European Commission was quoted as saying, yet it is precisely this dictation that has pushed allies to start searching for alternatives. In Asia, developments are moving even faster. South Korea, Japan, and even the Philippines, countries traditionally tied to the US through military and economic cooperation, have begun parallel talks on new agreements with China. Reuters reports that in Seoul, for the first time during closed-door negotiations, officials discussed the possibility of shifting part of their trade into Yuan. Just a few years ago, such a move would have been unthinkable. But now, experts say, the fear of a future under Trump outweighs the fear of breaking with the US. The Middle East's stance is especially painful for Washington. According to Bloomberg, Saudi Arabia and the UAE are negotiating with Beijing and New Delhi about creating a unified energy corridor without US participation. This is a betrayal of Washington, one Republican senator told Fox News. But in Riyadh, the tone is different. America has turned us into a target for sanctions and pressure. We must find ways to protect ourselves, said an unnamed source close to the royal family. The economic consequences for the US could be devastating. The New York Times writes that amid new trade barriers and retaliatory measures by a range of countries, American consumers may soon face an unprecedented surge in prices. In the coming months, the cost of meat, dairy, and grains could double, while the prices of imported goods could triple. Goldman Sachs economists warned in a note to investors, if Trump continues to escalate tariff pressure and allies respond with bans, American retailers face catastrophe. Prices will become unreachable for the middle class. For the first time in decades, the US risks finding itself in global isolation. Insiders on Capitol Hill, cited by the Washington Post, admit that panic is spreading among lawmakers. Some are demanding urgent negotiations with China, India, and Saudi Arabia, while others are calling for a fundamental rethink of foreign policy. But according to Axios, Trump is standing firm. America doesn't owe anyone anything. The whole world should adapt to us. The reality, however, is growing harsher. Already today, due to supply disruptions, supermarket chains in California and Texas have started rationing certain products. Photos of empty shelves published by the Associated Press shocked the public. CNN aired a primetime segment in which experts warned, if a compromise is not reached in the coming weeks, the country faces a new generation food crisis. The situation is further complicated by the fact that China is backing the states imposing restrictions against the US. As the South China Morning Post reports, Beijing is coordinating trade measures against Washington, building a united front of dozens of countries. According to the outlet, Argentina, Egypt, and even Turkey, a NATO ally, are already prepared to join this coalition. Such a scenario for the United States seemed like fantasy not long ago, but today it is becoming reality. Many experts call what is happening the last window of opportunity for America. There is still a chance to negotiate, writes Foreign Affairs. Deals can be made, balance can be found, the blow can be softened, but if Trump continues to act in a style of ultimatums, the US will end up in a situation where even its closest allies see us as a threat. This is where the greatest risk lies. America, long regarded as a symbol of freedom and economic prosperity, is turning into an isolated player willing to break the system for the sake of domestic slogans. For many nations, this has become a signal. It is time to look for a new center of power. And increasingly, that center is seen not in Washington, but in Beijing, New Delhi, and Riyadh. Today, the US stands at a crossroads. The decision of a single man will determine whether the country keeps its status as a leader or becomes a loner against whom the entire world unites. But time is running out. And if Trump does not seize this final chance, America faces the hardest times in its modern history. According to International Monetary Fund data cited by the Financial Times, inflation in the US could surpass 12% by year's end if trade conflicts escalate further. For a country accustomed to a stable 2 to 3%, that would be a true shock. The World Bank in its latest report stresses, America risks facing price increases comparable to those in developing nations during crises. The key drivers will be rising food and energy costs. Analysts warn that if today the average price of a liter of milk is $1.20, by winter it could reach $3. Eggs, meat, bread, all of it, forecasts say, will become 2 to 3 times more expensive. Bloomberg cites surveys showing that more than 67% of Americans already admit they fear empty shelves and shortages. Independent pollster Gallup reports that confidence in the White House's economic policy has dropped to a record low of 19%. For the first time, we see Americans at large beginning to view their own government as a source of instability rather than a guarantor of order, the study notes. Experts from Harvard Business School told CNBC that the blow will be especially painful for small businesses. The closure of trade channels, rising costs, and a sharp decline in consumer purchasing power could push tens of thousands of family shops and farms to the brink of bankruptcy. Already, farmers' associations in Iowa and Kansas have declared a catastrophic future if the current White House course continues. Energy markets are not staying on the sidelines either. Reuters reports that Saudi Arabia and Iran are considering restricting oil exports specifically to the US while maintaining stable supplies to Europe and Asia. If such a step is taken, gasoline prices in America could jump to $8 or $9 per gallon. For comparison, today, the average price is about $3.50. Economists call this a social time bomb. Investors are moving their funds en masse into Asian assets, and market analysts warn this is only the beginning. America is entering a period of systemic trust crisis. If the US was once the safe haven for capital, that status is now shifting to China and India. Experts at JP Morgan wrote in a private note to clients, parts of which were published by Business Insider. And all of this is a direct reaction to the policy of one man. Trump, in trying to strengthen the slogan "America First," is in fact pushing the country toward isolation, a weaker dollar, and the loss of its role as a global hub. For the first time in decades, the US risks ending up not at the top of the pyramid, but at its base, one that fewer and fewer countries are willing to support.